Welcome to the dark side of Reddit, the kind of place you definitely shouldn't visit at night. I'm the Reddit Herald, and today we're uncovering threads with stories that will send chills down your spine. Turn off your lights, pump up the volume, because we are diving right in. Look, from here on out, I'm the one who decides when we hang out. Just stop suffocating me. Those were the exact words my girlfriend used. I didn't even try to argue, I just gave her a quiet nod and kept my mouth shut. 2 whole weeks went by after that. Not a single text, no phone calls, and absolutely no plans to see each other. But then, out of nowhere one evening, I heard this faint knock on my front door. When I opened it, there she was standing on my porch, her eyes all glassy like she'd been crying. But it was what she was holding in her hands that made my heart completely skip a beat. Before we get too deep into what happened next, I'm actually incredibly close to hitting 1,000 subscribers on here. If you could take a second to hit that subscribe button and support the channel, it would honestly mean the world to me. Every single person who joins helps out a ton. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. To give you some context, I'm 27 years old, and up until about 3 months ago, I genuinely thought I had my entire life mapped out. I'd been dating Lauren for 2 solid years at that point. We originally crossed paths at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue, hit it off right from the jump, and honestly, within 6 months, we were pretty much living under the same roof. She made her living as a graphic designer, while I was grinding away in commercial real estate. It wasn't the most thrilling job in the world, but it brought in decent money and gave me a stable, predictable life. We had our little routines down to a science. We did brunch every Sunday, hit the theater for movie nights every Wednesday, and spent our weekends taking trips up to her parents' place by the lake. Everything just felt right, you know. It felt safe. But then, right around February, the whole vibe shifted. Lauren started staying late at the office way more than usual, and she stopped replying to my texts with her usual speed. Whenever I'd ask if she wanted to get together, she'd just tell me she was completely wiped out from work or already had plans to grab drinks with her coworkers. I'll be the first to admit that I started getting a bit clingy. I'd bombard her with multiple texts asking when we could finally hang out, throwing out date ideas, and trying to lock down some actual plans. Looking back on it now, yeah, I can see I was being pretty pushy. But at the time, I could just feel her slipping away from me, and I honestly didn't know how else to handle it. One evening in the early part of March, we were hanging out at her apartment. I'd picked up some Thai takeout, which was her absolute favorite, and suggested we find something to watch. But she was glued to her laptop and barely even acknowledged I was there. Suddenly, she snapped the screen shut and said, "Can we talk?" "Yeah, of course," I told her. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath. "You've just been incredibly overwhelming lately. The non-stop texting, constantly tracking where I am, wanting to see me every other day, it honestly feels like I can't breathe." I could feel my stomach instantly drop into my shoes. "I'm just missing you," I said. "It feels like we barely see each other these days." "And that's exactly why I need some breathing room," she replied, her voice getting really firm. "So, here's how we're going to handle things moving forward. From now on, I'll be the one to call the shots on when we meet up. Stop putting so much pressure on me. I'll reach out to you whenever I'm ready." Part of me desperately wanted to fight back on that. I wanted to tell her that a relationship is supposed to be a two-way street, and that this whole thing felt like I was being sent to the corner for a timeout. But at the end of the day, I was terrified of losing her, so I just nodded my head. "All right," I told her quietly. "I'll wait for you." Her expression softened just a little bit after that. She reached across the table, gave my hand a gentle squeeze, and murmured, "Thank you. I just really need some space right now." That all went down on March 8th. The only reason the date sticks out so clearly in my mind is because it was my sister's birthday, and I had actually ducked out of her party early just so I could go see Lauren. To be fair, those first couple of days weren't completely miserable. I managed to keep myself pretty occupied. I started hitting the gym a lot harder, reconnected with some buddies I'd been neglecting, and poured all my energy into locking down a massive property deal at the office. But by the 5th day, the absolute silence started getting to me. There were no more "good morning" texts, no funny memes sent out of nowhere, just nothing. I ended up checking her social media pages. It was a stupid move, I know, but I couldn't help it. And there she was, still posting away. Pictures of her morning coffee cups, shots of her desk at work, a photo of the sunset from somewhere downtown. She was doing completely fine. In fact, she was doing great without me. By the 10th day of silence, I was barely getting any sleep. I must have drafted about 50 different text messages, but I ended up deleting every single one of them before hitting send. My buddy Kevin explicitly told me I just needed to pack up and move on. He was convinced she was totally checked out of the relationship but was just too big of a coward to actually say it to my face. But I wasn't ready to accept that. Not just yet. That brings us to day 14. 2 full weeks of absolute radio silence. I had just walked through the door after a long day at work, loosened up my tie, and poured myself a glass of whiskey that I didn't even really want to drink. It was right around 7:30 p.m., and it was already pitch black outside. And then, I heard it. A really soft, hesitant knock on my front door. My heart instantly started pounding in my chest because I definitely wasn't expecting any visitors. I walked over and pulled the door open, and there she was. Lauren was standing right there in my hallway. Her eyes were completely bloodshot and watery, looking like she'd been crying her eyes out for hours. She was wearing a pair of basic jeans and a massive, oversized sweater, with her hair tossed up into a messy bun. But it was what she was holding that caught my attention, a white plastic shopping bag from the local pharmacy. "Can I come inside?" she whispered. I didn't say anything, I just stepped out of the way to let her through. She walked right past me, set that plastic bag down on the kitchen counter, and just stood there frozen, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. What would you do if you were in my shoes right now? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Trying to keep my voice as steady as possible, I finally asked, "What's going on?" She turned around to face me, and that's when I noticed the tears actively rolling down her cheeks. "I'm pregnant," she said. It felt like the entire room literally tilted on its axis. I had to reach out and grab the edge of the kitchen counter just to keep my balance. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," she muttered again, her voice completely cracking this time. I took 3 separate tests, and every single one of them came back positive. You'd think I would have felt some kind of massive wave of emotion right then, maybe absolute joy, or total panic, or just something. But honestly, the only thing I felt was pure, unadulterated confusion. We had always been incredibly careful, and she was supposed to be taking the pill religiously. And the kicker was, we hadn't even slept together in over a month. I looked right at her and said, "Lauren, we haven't been intimate in weeks." She couldn't even look me in the eye, she just stared down at the floor. The silence that filled the room right then felt like a massive, endless canyon. Finally, I managed to force the words out, "Then whose is it?" She just broke down, covering her face with both hands and sobbing. "His name is Troy," she sniffled. "He's a photographer I work with. It started back in January. It was only one time, I swear. Just one stupid mistake after we grabbed some drinks following a meeting with a client. I honestly thought it was nothing, that I could just bury it deep down and move on with my life. But then my period was late. I threw my hand up to cut her off. Stop. Just stop right there." My brain was working overtime trying to process everything she was throwing at me. January. She'd been stepping out on me since January. All those late nights at the office, all that emotional distance, it had absolutely nothing to do with her needing breathing room. It was entirely about her covering up an affair. "So this whole, I need space routine," I said, my voice coming out eerily calm and quiet. That was just a game to keep me at arm's length while you figured out what your next move was. No. I mean, yes, kind of, she stammered. But I was just so confused. I didn't know how to get out. I walked straight over to my front door and swung it wide open. Get out. She looked up at me, completely startled. What? Get out. I repeated. Take your pregnancy tests, take your confession, and get the hell out of my apartment. Please. Just hear me out for a second. She begged. There is absolutely nothing left to listen to, I told her, still holding the door wide open. You cheated on me. You lied straight to my face. You made me feel like I was the crazy one, like I was the problem just for wanting to see my own girlfriend. And now you're pregnant with another guy's baby. We are completely done. She stood there frozen for a second, tears actively streaming down her face, before she finally grabbed that plastic pharmacy bag and walked right past me. She paused for just a split second in the doorway and whispered, "I'm so sorry." I didn't say a word, I just shut the door right in her face. I didn't catch a single wink of sleep that night. I just sat there on my couch, staring blankly at the wall, replaying every single moment of the last 2 months over and over in my head. Every weak excuse, every time she deflected, every single instance where she made me feel guilty for wanting to spend quality time with her. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I just couldn't face the office. Then, I did something I'm really not proud of. I sat down and started tracking every single digital footprint I could find. I dug through old texts, social media profiles, emails, you name it. And that's exactly how I stumbled across Troy's profile. He was a photographer in his mid-30s with this incredibly pretentious bio about capturing raw human emotion. Perfect. I noticed he'd posted a picture about 2 weeks back where you could see Lauren in the background at some art gallery opening. The caption read, "Inspiring evening with inspiring people." It made me physically sick to my stomach. But as I was looking closer, I noticed something in the comments section. This woman named Rachel had left a comment saying, "Didn't know you were back on the scene. Thought you and Melissa were still figuring things out." That caught my attention, so I clicked back over to his main profile and scrolled way further down. And right there she was, Melissa. His girlfriend. Or well, maybe his ex-girlfriend. The photos of them together pretty much stopped around December, but there weren't any breakup posts or anything indicating they had actually called it quits. I took screenshots of absolutely everything. 3 days later, Lauren sent me a text. She said she wanted to meet up because we needed to discuss the next steps. I agreed to meet her at a little coffee shop right around the corner from my office building. When she showed up, she looked absolutely drained. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her hair looked like it hadn't been washed in days. A small part of me wanted to feel bad for her, but the rest of me vividly remembered exactly why we were sitting there. "I'm keeping the baby," she blurted out the second she walked up, before I could even sit down in my chair. I know that's probably the last thing you want to hear, but... Hey, it's not my call to make, I interrupted. It's not my kid. She visibly flinched at that. I know. But I still thought you should know. Troy, he doesn't want anything to do with this. When I broke the news to him, he literally accused me of trying to trap him. He told me he'd need a DNA paternity test before he'd even think about stepping up. Smart guy, I muttered under my breath. I know I deserve that, she said quietly. Look, I know I completely destroyed what we had. I'm not sitting here asking for your forgiveness, and I'm definitely not asking you to take me back. I felt like I owed you the whole truth. I looked at her across the table. Have you told Melissa yet? The color completely drained from her face. Who? Troy's girlfriend. Or maybe his ex, it's honestly kind of hard to tell from his Instagram feed. She started stammering, I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and showed her all the screenshots I'd taken. Look at this. From January all the way back through December. Tons of couple photos. So either he was actively cheating on her with you, or they were on a temporary break and he conveniently forgot to mention it. Lauren looked like she was about to throw up right then and there. Oh my God. Yeah, I said, standing up from the table. Good luck with that. Here is the final part of the story, completely reworked into the same natural, conversational style. The sentences are restructured for a smooth, consistent flow that fits perfectly for an AI voiceover to read. Looks like both of us were getting played this entire time. Honestly, Lauren, good luck with everything. I really mean that. I turned around and walked right out of there before she even had a chance to say another word. About 2 weeks after that meeting at the coffee shop, I noticed a random message request on my Instagram from a woman named Melissa. Apparently, she'd spotted a totally harmless comment I'd left on one of Troy's old posts months ago, and somehow, she managed to connect the dots and realize I was tied to Lauren. Her message was short and straight to the point. Hey. I know this probably seems really weird, but I think you and I need to have a conversation about Troy and your ex. We ended up meeting up for a few drinks that exact same evening. Right off the bat, I could tell Melissa was incredibly sharp, direct, and honestly, she was way angrier about the whole situation than I'd ever been. It turned out Troy had been feeding her this total line of garbage, telling her they were actively working through their relationship issues and that he just needed a little space but still loved her, all while he was sleeping with Lauren behind her back. The moment Lauren dropped the bomb about being pregnant, Troy completely flipped out and called Melissa in a total panic. He confessed to absolutely everything and started begging her to forgive him. He told me it was just a one-time slip-up, Melissa told me, sounding incredibly bitter. He claimed she was the one who came on to him, and that he was just way too drunk. I couldn't help but chuckle. Classic. That's the exact same story Lauren gave me. One-time thing, she was totally confused, drinks were involved, the whole 9 yards. Melissa just let out this dark laugh. Honestly, those two completely deserve each other. The only difference now is she's pregnant, and he's losing his mind thinking child support is going to completely ruin his art career. We sat there and talked for hours, trading stories and comparing all the different lies we'd been told. It was wild realizing just how much of our lives over the last few months had been completely built on pure manipulation. By the time we called it a night, I wouldn't exactly say we were best friends, but there was this mutual understanding between us. As we were walking out to our cars, I asked her, "So, what are you planning to do next?" She just gave me this cold, calculating smile. "Troy has this massive showcase coming up next month. Big gallery opening, potential investors, the whole deal. I'm going to make absolutely sure every single person who steps through that door knows exactly what kind of guy he really is." I didn't ask for any specifics. Honestly, I didn't even want to know. It's officially been 3 months since that night Lauren showed up at my place crying. I haven't spoken a single word to her since that afternoon at the coffee shop. According to some mutual friends, I heard she packed up and moved back into her parents' house upstate. The baby is due sometime in November. As for Troy, apparently, he officially signed away his parental rights the second the DNA test came back proving the kid was his. He ended up paying her some lump sum settlement just to avoid any future legal headaches or financial claims. And Melissa? She did exactly what she promised she'd do. She showed up right at Troy's gallery opening with stack after stack of printed out receipts. Text messages, photos, a literal timeline of all the lies he'd told both her and Lauren. She didn't cause a massive scene, and she didn't scream or shout. She literally just stood there and handed them out like pamphlets to every single person who walked into the building. His entire career didn't completely crash and burn, but a handful of major investors immediately backed out of the project. Last I heard, he packed his bags and moved out to Portland. What did this story teach you about trust and ignoring red flags in a relationship? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. As for my own life, I'm doing alright. Better than alright, actually. I finally started going to therapy, and it helped me realize that I'd been ignoring a massive amount of red flags early on simply because I was terrified of winding up alone. Turns out, being single is a million times better than being with someone who constantly makes you feel like you're losing your mind. My buddy Kevin actually set me up on a blind date last week with his cousin. We grabbed some coffee and ended up talking for 3 straight hours. The best part? She actually texted me later that night saying she had a great time and really wanted to do it again. It just felt totally normal. Easy. Exactly the way a relationship is supposed to feel from the start. I don't hold any hatred toward Lauren anymore. To be honest, I don't really feel anything at all when her name comes up, and that's probably the healthiest sign of progress I could ask for. She made her choices, I made mine, and now we're both just out here living with the consequences. Edit 1. A ton of you guys have been asking if I ever got any real closure or a genuine apology from her. The short answer is no. But honestly, I don't even need one at this point. Real closure is something you have to give yourself, it's not something you sit around waiting for someone else to hand to you. Edit 2. Someone else asked if I'd ever consider giving Lauren another shot if she reached out to me down the road. That is a hard no. The trust is completely gone, and you just can't rebuild a foundation that was never solid in the first place.